Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Will Strauss. As Heather said, I'm one of the editors here at SVG Europe. As we saw earlier in Lorenzo's presentation, sports media consumption continues to evolve. One of the ongoing trends is for watching and interacting with sports content on mobile devices. And TikTok, of course, is one of the mobile platforms of choice, which is, I guess, disrupting, in a positive sense, the way we produce sports content as well as view it. But to what end? So to help us better understand TikTok's relationship and relevance to sport, its audience and its place in the live and on-demand sports market, joining me today is Sanjit, who is a TikTok Strategic Partner Manager for Sport. Sanjit, welcome.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you for joining us. Shortly we're going to talk about best practice for sport content creation, and we're going to look forward as well to see where both TikTok and mobile sports content consumption might go next. But we're going to start by rattling through some fundamentals. Sanjit, how do you describe what TikTok is, and how important is sports content to the platform?
Firstly, Will, thanks very much for having me here. The way I see TikTok is it's essentially an extremely exciting and enriching entertainment platform which provides a wide array of content for a very, very diverse community, and this diverse community is what powers it. As part of that, one of our key missions is also to democratize content creation, due to which, we've provided users, not audiences, with a wide array of in-app tools to create that content and express that creativity.
Who watches it? What sort of demographic are we talking? And generally speaking, what do they watch when it comes to sport?
So in terms of demographics, we do tend to have a very, very broad sort of array of people on the platform, all genders, all sexual orientations, ages, geographic locations, etc. When it comes to sport actually is one of the biggest categories of content on TikTok. We do have dedicated teams to build out that ecosystem further and further spread out across the globe. And in terms of what users watch for sport, of course, due to the variety of demographics we have, our audiences also tend to want to watch different things. One of our key missions when it comes to sport is actually to build out this messaging of where all fans play, which is why, we have all kinds of sport, right from the creme de la creme of the Formula Ones, the Premier Leagues, etc., all the way to semi-professional sport, and each of them have very high engagement rates and are, engaging with different people.
Thank you. Within that, what role does live sport play?
So while we aren't really in the business of acquiring broadcast rights, live sport does have a very, very big place, a very, very big part to play on TikTok. And we've seen, again, teams, leagues, rights holders of all sizes leverage this tool, because the way I see live really working on TikTok is it's a very good engagement hook for audiences, because the entry point to live on TikTok is actually through something called the For You page, which is the same space, which is where you discover content. Now, for those of you who don't know what the For You page is, it's essentially the page that the TikTok app opens to. And now this is a personalized, tailored piece of content that is, unique to each and every user. So there's no sort of, you're not actively trying to go look for something, rather it's coming to you, which is why live sport, and the entry point being through the For You page as well, is actually able to reach audiences that it may traditionally not have reached, or audiences who traditionally might not be looking for it. Because of the viewing experience, they come across it in the For You page, and it's just a very, very compelling viewing experience, and that's how you can convert new fans.
Thank you. You mentioned that you're not a sports rights buyer. So what is your relationship with a broadcaster or a federation or a sports right holder? What's that relationship like? How does that manifest itself?
No, absolutely. So we've been fortunate enough to actually develop very, very strong, mutually beneficial relationships with teams, leagues, broadcasters, rights holders, and the full sort of plethora of them, really. And the way we tend to work with them typically is, initially, we'll help them set up on the platform, provide the one-to-one service, best practice trips, things like that, to bring them up to a place where they can actually start leveraging the audience they build out, and forming more meaningful bonds and gathering new audiences. So once we're done helping them, we'll kind of develop more moment-based activation. So let's say, if there's an FA Cup final, for example, what we'd like to do is we'd like to work with BBC, who'd be the broadcaster. We'd like to work with both teams, the finalists, and also the FA themselves, to develop a unique content offering which you can't really find anywhere else, and bring that to life. There will also be live content around that. It doesn't necessarily have to be the game itself, because that's not something that is very commonly seen on TikTok. It is seen, but we'd like to bring sort of all the shoulder content around it. So, what happens before the game, what happens after the game, what happens outside the stadium, because these are all things that fans are very much looking for nowadays, and we're able to provide this, but from official sources. And the way this benefits the organizations that we're working with is they basically get to leverage our algorithms and our sort of distribution mechanisms to help them reach new fans and get that audience watching sport which they might not traditionally have watched.
Got it, understood. Let's delve a bit deeper into that then, into sort of what success looks like for those brands or sports. Who's winning? Who's winning on TikTok in your opinion, and why?
So I think it'd be unfair to share particular names, but again, what I mentioned before is we have everyone from the Formula Ones, the Premier Leagues, and the Olympics, World Athletics of the world, all the way down to semi-professional sports. So Burnley Women's, Walton and Hersham FC, they all have massive followings on platform, highly engaged followings on platform, but they also, because of constraints both in terms of the assets they have access to, they all follow very different content strategies, and what they show is very different from one another as well.
You mentioned a couple of examples, but what sort of type of content perhaps is most successful? Give us a few, without naming potentially the brands, but give us an idea of the type of content that might really work.
So with sport, of course, fast, snappy, quick highlights is always going to be your bread and butter. That's never going to go out of fashion. And sport as a category itself lends itself very well to TikTok, which is short, snappy, high energy, quick videos. So highlights works very, very well in that format. But two other formats which I feel are slightly more unique to TikTok and actually work even better than highlights, in my opinion, is behind-the-scenes content. So think about content that you can't really see elsewhere, or content that you won't necessarily think of going and looking for. Because of the way the For You page engine works, it'll drive this content into people's feeds and show it to them, and that's what, again, starts that fan journey. I think a great example of this would be if any of you saw anything around the Olympics in Tokyo last year, when TikTok was showing a lot of athletes, showing a lot of content. Now that was completely organic and completely done by them, so it shows you the power of that engine. And then, of course, there's TikTok at its heart is very much a personality-led platform. So first-person, athlete-focused content, or even content from people who you wouldn't expect fans to interact with. So think about the football team's nutritionist or the football team's doctor. All of these people have their own stories to tell, and it's really, really interesting to see. And something that we really like saying is what may be boring to myself or the social media manager at the club, because they're used to seeing it all the time, is actually exceptionally interesting to a user, because they don't see it, and it's that unseen side that helps them form an even deeper connection.
Yeah, thank you very much. When making those types of content, do you have any sort of best practice tips you can share?
So there's two types of content essentially. First of all is the short, snappy, high energy, fast-paced content. But then about, I think, 10 months back now, we actually launched longer form content as well. And longer form on TikTok means it goes up to 10 minutes. Okay. So for the short, snappy, high engaging content, it's very similar. It's very simple in my opinion. You don't need any high-end production equipment and things like that. It can be very much first-person. The real key is to start with an engagement hook in the very beginning. So I wouldn't say that you should do a lot of scene setting and kind of build the story that way. Start with an engagement hook. The user needs to know what they're seeing within the first 2 or 3 seconds. And try having a hook within it wherever possible. And really, it's all about showing the best bits of content. Now, when it comes to long-form content, we've actually seen this strategy turned upside down on its head a little bit, because what we see with sports fans, and I'm one of them myself, is you want to see a lot more shoulder content around sports, or you want to see stories that go on behind the scenes. So it's about that storytelling experience which you need to get into the longer form pieces. So form a more well-lined story, but it's very important that you keep those engagement hooks in that throughout. Now when it comes to long form, this is for non sort of highlights content per se. Highlights as well actually works really, really well with both of these categories, both short and long. So when you're doing highlights in short form content, what I do is there's a few native formats we have on TikTok, foremost amongst which is split screen highlights. I mentioned earlier how TikTok is very much a personality-led platform. So what we've seen take off in a big way over the last year is split screen, where you have the action from the pitch or the court or whatever that might be on one half of the screen, and the other half is coaches' reactions, family reactions, fans' reactions, or whatever that might be, and that really helps bring out the emotion behind the sport and forms deeper connections again Whereas on the longer form side of things, one thing that we see work really well is vlog highlights. So, providing a first-person audience's view of the sport, and not just the sport itself, but the entire day. So all the way from when you leave your house, go through the turnstile, watch the warm-ups, etc., etc.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I hope that's been useful. Slightly difficult question to ask you, but how do you monetize this content, or can you monetize this content on TikTok?
So once audiences, once sort of rights holders, sports content providers come up to critical mass, there are a few monetization options available to them on platform. Foremost amongst them is branded content. So branded content essentially is when you reach out to one of your sponsors or a brand wants to fund pieces of content because they want to leverage the audience that you have built up on platform. And essentially monetize that way. And the other more interesting monetization tool is something called TikTok Shop, which is an e-commerce offering that was rolled out on TikTok earlier this year, which we all know fans for their clubs, they do feel very strongly, so they often want to buy merchandise. That is one way to sort of monetize on platform as well. Brilliant,
thank you. As we come towards the end, now let's look to the future. How do you see TikTok evolving, especially in relation to sports content?
So as I mentioned, we recently did launch longer form content, which was step one in our evolution, moving away from just the super short, snappy clips, because what we've noticed with longer form content is that audiences tend to spend a lot more time on that content and develop a deeper affinity for brands. So bring that storytelling side to that piece, which is something very useful. Beyond that, we also believe that sport itself is evolving all the time with not just new sports but new formats within existing sports coming out, on how we can build unique content offerings around those sports to sort of give them a bit of a kickstart and build audiences instantly. And for anyone that has followed TikTok over the last year, you'd also notice that we do have a massive sort of place to play in women's sport, and that is one thing that we are very, very adamant on continuing to do, and pushing that. Bringing women's sport into the limelight and giving it the attention that it deserves. And both our Women's Six Nations sponsorships earlier this year, as well as the Women's Euro sponsorship, were really testament to that fact, and we plan to continue doing that moving forward.
Fantastic. And coincidentally, there's a session on that coming up in a few minutes' time after we've done some more on mobile content. Again, just to wrap up, thinking more generally about what impact could TikTok have on the wider sports media market? Do you think actually it could change the way we do things quite significantly across sports broadcasting, for example?
So I feel like TikTok is already actually changing the media market in a few ways. Firstly, as I mentioned, it allows broadcasters, rights holders to reach audiences that they wouldn't traditionally reach and develop new audiences altogether. And on the back of that audience, it enables them to open up whole new monetization opportunities, or also reinvent their own content formats that they felt have worked for so long. Very, very good example of this would be, so we had a sponsorship, we have a sponsorship with the Burnley women's team. And as part of this, what the Burnley women's team essentially does is they stream every single home game in entirety on the TikTok platform. As you can imagine, and no disrespect to Burnley, but as a third division semi-professional women's football team, they aren't often going to see the biggest audiences in stadium. We've been able to drive that audience to them through the TikTok Live product, which actually earlier this year led to them signing their first ever front of shirt sponsor on the back of that TikTok audience they developed. So I feel like stories like this and things like this, because of the new audiences, which are all driven by the algorithm, that TikTok will have a role to play in changing what we can expect of the media landscape in sport.
Thank you, that's great. One last thing, this is events called FutureSPORT, so I'm going to ask you to end with a prediction for us to finish things off. So if you can give us one prediction to take away succinctly, we've got about 30 seconds, what would that prediction be?
It's a tricky one, but I feel that in terms of sports content, we're going to see more and more trends start on TikTok. I think an example of this, and something that has already started and we've built out, is providing the access to players or athletes behind the scenes, because we built out this format with a few people, few athletes and teams earlier, which is Ask So-and-so. And that essentially allows you to just send in questions to athletes, teams, coaches, whatever that might be, who can then actually respond to your comment with a video within the app itself. And again, deepening that engagement. And that's just an example of a trend that can take many different formats and shapes.
Brilliant. That's all we've got time for. Sanjit, thank you so much for joining us. Please join me in thanking Sanjit for his time.
Thank you very much.
Top man, thank you very much.